Hey guys, it's Splatoon here, and welcome to Splatoon 2 mod. As I've stated before, this is easily my favourite game, thanks to its fun gameplay and the insane replayability it has. A lot of lifelong memories have been made with this game, and that's why I'm dedicating this whole mod to Splatoon 2. And to kick things off, I'm talking about the sub-weapons. These are secondary weapons to cover your main weapon that can be fired out at any time, assuming you have enough ink, that can be useful in battle. And today, I'm ranking them based on how useful they are to me, so yeah, this ain't based on competitiveness at all. Also, these are only ranked based on how useful they are in turf wars and ranked battles. Other modes were not taken into consideration. So let's go! Yeah, this sub is almost useless. When this explodes, it creates a sphere of toxic gas that's only up for about 5 seconds and can be easily walked out of, and any opponents inside of it will suffer reduced speed, yes, even with that it's still easy to walk out of, and a lower ink recovery rate, which can leave them vulnerable to kill, but it doesn't actually do any direct damage to them. So if you want to splat an opponent, you still gotta finish them off with the remaining, at best, 40% of your ink. Seriously, just like, use a sub that splats or damages them directly if you really need to splat them. A sub that homes in on an opponent and does good damage on contact? Sounds awesome! But it's got two very fatal flaws. One, it's incredibly slow and easy to avoid, and two, you can shoot it down, which combined with the first issue, that's very easy to do. Once thrown, it does drop a decent amount of ink around you, and if it's not shot down once it homes in on somebody, it does send out a good amount of ink, but that almost never happens, and if it doesn't home in on someone, it'll just act like a normal bomb, so I don't think this bomb is worth the 65% of your ink it uses. The only thing this sub is really reliable for is for exposing an enemy's location, but the next sub does that way better. Like the Toxic Mist, this sub doesn't ink turf, nor splat opponents once thrown. Instead, it just exposes the location of any enemies inside the radius for about 8 seconds to your whole team, unless they have the bomb defense up DX, so in other words it'll always be 8 seconds. Being able to track your opponents does give you an advantage in splatting them, more than a slow moving homing bomb does at least anyway. Thankfully it doesn't use that much ink at 45%, with only one sub using less than that, so it doesn't use more ink than it deserves unlike the Toxic Mist, but since it doesn't do any direct damage or even ink any turf, I prefer the later ones. This sub really isn't going to do much in terms of splatting. In fact, I don't think I've seen anyone get splatted by this in both this game and the original. This one's more aimed at ink in turf. Basically, once you throw it out, it'll stick to any surface and spread out ink in a circle around it, which will slowly decrease over time. I only really find it useful for charging up a special, and even then, the amount of ink the sub uses, it uses 60% of a full tank, it's barely ever worth it. I mean, if you got a short range weapon like the Aerospray RG, you can throw it in a place which you can't normally ink, I guess, but then an opponent will likely destroy it, and you can only have one out at a time. Really, I think there are later subs that are much better inking turf since they can't be destroyed. When I first saw this sub in the original, didn't really think it was all that great, not really inking that much turf or being able to damage opponents. But when it comes to defense, the splash ball is easily the most useful. Once deployed, after being thrown in an admittedly pretty awkward arc, it'll create a wall of ink that opponents cannot pass through for a certain amount of time, as well as blocking their shots, which will reduce the amount of time the sub's up. However, you can still shoot through them, putting your opponents at a massive disadvantage. It's especially useful in narrow pathways, however in open areas, it can be tricky to use, so obviously, this sub's usefulness is very situational, whereas some of the later ones aren't. The problem I find with Squid jumping to a teammate is that based on my experiences, 90% of the time, you're going to get splatted upon landing unless you can dodge roll, so having an extra option to jump to can actually be really helpful. It's not a sub I really use much, as it uses 75% of your ink, and they can be easily destroyed by the opposing team, but it is handy to have one as an option if there's one out there, especially if it's in a relatively safe location. Out of all the subs, the ink mine is the most accurate of the bunch, as you can place it exactly on the spot assuming it's an inkable surface, and you can place up to 2 of these. If you place a third one, it will just detonate the first one you place. Any poor opponents that get near it will activate it, which will damage them and even expose their location, effectively making the point sensor redundant. This sub is most effective when placed in areas that opponents are almost certainly going to go through, which changes depending on the map, but there's 2 places it's always really useful. It's really nasty in tower control because at some point an opponent is going to be on the tower, and it's also really good in splat zones because, obviously, an opponent is going to be in the splat zone at some point. It's very unlikely this will splat people, but because of the damage and tracking output, it can certainly help with that. One of the last subs added to the game, the fizzy bomb can be charged up unlike other bombs. Hold the R button to charge it up, and you can also shake the controller to charge it faster. After that, it can be thrown ahead, leaving a trail of ink behind, and explode up to 3 times. Although that trail of ink it leaves is heavily outclassed by a later sub, which doesn't require a charge. But charging it up has its advantages and disadvantages. It's a lot quicker if it's thrown straight out, and can deal some quick damage to help you spot the opponent with some good aim, but it won't get very far. Whereas if you charge it, it can be thrown further, explodes more times, leaves more ink behind, and deals more damage, except it's hard to aim and you're vulnerable whilst it's charging. It is nice having a sub weapon that has some versatility to it. There's just one problem with this sub. The weapons that have this are ones that I'd almost never use. The first bomb you learn in the game. Once it lands after being thrown, it'll explode about 1 second after it touches something. Any opponents right next to it when it explodes will be splattered, and within a certain range will also be damaged as well. But because it rolls, it's very hard to splat anyone with this weapon, though you can use the rolling to splat the bomb earlier, so it's better at displacing opponents rather than splatting them. Although it does give you a long range attack if you have a weapon with rubbish range. It is decent at covering turf, but considering it uses 70% of your ink, you're best off with your own weapon for that. It is however a good choice of splat zones I find, because once the bomb's in the zone, some of your ink is going to explode on it whether your opponents like it or not. There are also a few things it can explode on contact with, like the splash balls and the bubbles in the bubble blower, but any of the layer bombs will also do the same. I think it's a good bomb to have, but it has nothing special about it to rank it any higher. The ore bomb starts out the same as the splat bomb, but once it lands, it'll attempt to detect opposing players as shown by the circle it emits when it's deployed. If it doesn't detect anyone, it'll just explode on the spot, but if it does, it'll chase after the player and explode when near them. This sub is unlikely to kill someone as it takes a while to explode. If you actually kill someone with this, it's because they're more idiotic than your teammates, but it's really good at displacing people, especially chargers. I find this sub the most useful in tower control, because if you throw it on the tower, your opponents are going to have fun avoiding that if they stay on the tower. In fact, because of how slow it is, they may be off for quite a while. Like the splat bomb, it's best at displacing people, but considering this only uses 55% of your ink, I think it's the better of the two. The suction bomb is also very similar to the splat bomb, even using the same amount of ink, but it has 2 major advantages compared to 1 disadvantage. For one, it sticks on landing, allowing you to be a little more accurate with it, and the blast radius is larger, which for me, more than compensates for the slower explosion time. Like the last sub, it can be a nightmare in tower control, except even more so here, as it'll stick to the tower, pretty much forcing any opponents off it. And like the auto bomb, its slower explosion time might actually be useful here, as that's longer they can't be on the tower, which is why the suction bomb is easily my favourite sub to bring into tower control. Also like the splat bomb again, if it's placed in the zone, it'll be even more ink in the zone, and that's longer they can't go near it. It ranks above the auto bomb because it's a lot more accurate, and it's much more likely to splat someone, especially if you can stick it in a hidden area. One of the more unique bombs in the game, the curly bomb is fired right in front of you and it bounces off walls, leaving a trail of it behind you that you can swim through until it explodes, which will splat anyone next to it. And you can even hold the trigger to cook the bomb, which will increase the width of the trail and the blast radius, but decreases the distance it travels. However, since it travels on the ground, there's no aerial options, so if the platform's above jumping height, you can't throw it over there. It's more useful at moving around the map and for making a quick getaway. Like for example in Clan Blitz, it's my favourite sub to use, because it can create quick pathways to the opponent's basket, and if you have sub saver on, you can easily fire 2 of the ink you recovered in the first trail. Not to mention you can use this to get you to the clans around the map a lot faster. Like some of the last subs, it uses 70% of your ink, but it's definitely the best sub for getting you around the map, which is why it ranks so high. And the only one left, it's the burst bomb, and it's for the fact that it explodes on contact, making it the most practical for me. If you're in a 1v1 scuffle and your opponent is already heavily damaged, you can dish out a good amount of damage quickly with this sub, which might just be the difference on who gets splatted. It also doesn't consume as much ink as some of the other subs do, only consuming 40% of your ink, so you can fire up to 2 of these with a full tank, which is actually enough to splat an opponent if both get direct hits. It's also really quick after being thrown, so you can quickly ink the ground around you, especially if you're trapped in enemy ink. I just find this this sub to be the least situational of the subs, and considering it uses the least ink of the subs as well, there's no question it's my favourite. Many of my favourite weapons have this sub, which was to be continued. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Next week, I will be ranking the specials, which you can click right here once it's up, or if you wish, you can check out my hardest Doctor expansion video I've done before. Okay, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again next week. I'll see you all later.